So thanks so much for joining us. This is a conversation I've been wanting to have in the community for a while, and so it's really special for me that we're now having it. And we're going to talk about what the role of imagination practice or collective imagination practice is in supporting us to shift the deep narratives we live by. And some of us might have some experience of that. I think we're all in this room because we have a deep longing for it. It somehow rings a bell that's in us when we hear this topic. But we might have different kinds of experiences of being involved in that, and that's all totally good and fine. I thought it might be helpful if I just started by explaining a bit about what I mean by deep narrative, because the word narrative and narrative change is used in lots of different ways. So I just thought that might be a good way to get us started. So first of all, I want to draw your attention to an amazing publication, which was, it's some years ago now, actually. It was written by Ruth Taylor, and I'm just going to put the link to it in the there we are, in the chat, so that you can like enjoy reading it at your leisure. And this does a really good job of outlining what deep narrative change sort of means, and then giving some beautiful examples of it. And I think the point I really wanted to make was that deep narrative change is working sort of below the level. It includes, but works below the level of just sort of surface level behaviour changes. So quite often we can talk about narrative change. So for example, I did a project with a local authority here in the UK. And in that project, the local authority had a real problem understanding, communicating with, and giving space to the disabled community, which it was supposed to be supporting. And so I did a project where I gathered lots of stories of their experience and, ran some training, basically to help the local authority be more understanding and more able to imagine the lives of disabled people. That isn't really deep narrative. I wasn't really doing anything to address the deep ableism in the system. I was working at a much more superficial level. It was more like strategic comms. And the aim of the strategic comms is stop being so dismissive of disabled people. Like, be nicer. It wasn't getting under the skin of those narratives that are dry, that keep perpetuating those behaviours being reinforced again and again in the structures that the local authority puts out there. It's maybe a first step on the road to that. I'm not saying it was not worth doing, but you can see the difference, can't you? I was telling my niece and nephew last week about this workshop that I was going to do. They're saying, "What are you doing next week in work?" And they're 11 and 9. I said, "I'm doing a workshop on deep narratives." "What's a deep narrative?" And I said to them, "Okay, and they definitely got this example. I said, we could have a narrative about education, which is we could sort of like try and help people value education more through our communications, but deeply questioning whether what kinds of knowledge count as education is working on the deep narrative. Is an examination an appropriate way to measure knowledge? And is the kind of knowledge it measures the only and important kind of knowledge? Should we value the kind of categorical, codified sort of knowledge above all other kinds of knowledge? That would be a deep narrative embedded in education. In climate change, we could have strategic comms which are about trying to live a sustainable lifestyle, because essentially that's the only thing we often feel we can do on that level. All right, I will buy recycled plastic bottles, or I will compost my veggie peelings, or whatever that might be. And we could try and influence people's behaviours through strategic comms in that way. But that's not getting to the deep narrative underneath the problem, which is the kind of belief in economic growth and productivity being the only way in which we can meet our needs. addressing that narratives takes a different kind of work. It means really practicing being interdependent in communities. It means really questioning what need is, etc., etc. So I just wanted, these are just three little examples of the difference between working at narrative on quite a superficial level and working at the deep level. Does that sort of make sense and help to orientate us a little bit before we move on? All right. So, when Devon and I met to prepare for this, we inevitably sort of fell to, oh, what is the deepest of deep narratives that resources us and that we want to live by? And we sort of landed on this sense of trusting in our innate goodness, and in the planet's innate goodness, in life's innate goodness. So on that note, Devon, I'm just going to hand over to you to give us a nice little introduction to get us all together in the same place and landed.
Thank you, Hannah. Thank you for grounding us all into the realities of deep narratives in the world. This, to me, is the deep narrative that I want us all to remember the most, and so I'm really excited to hold this with all of you. And I want us to just start by landing together. Just take a few moments to notice all of the beautiful people in this space with you. All these people that have decided to come and be in the exploration of deep narratives, who understand the importance of the imagination in the process of reconnecting with the truths of the world. Yeah, people from all over. Take a moment to appreciate the windows into their worlds that we're getting right now. The flowers, the pictures, the bodies in front of you. Then I want to invite you to tune into your body. How are you feeling sitting where you are, observing the people in this space? You noticing that you're holding tension anywhere in your body? See if you can invite some part of your body to just soften a little bit. You can just get 5% more comfortable wherever you're sitting right now. And then when you're ready, I invite you to close your eyes. And if closing your eyes is too much right now, feel free to just have a soft gaze, wide gaze, not focusing on anything. Maybe bringing your eyes around your knees or the horizon. And I want you to feel down to your seat and to your feet. Feeling that which is below you, holding you. Feeling it come up to meet you. Noticing what an amazing job gravity is doing of holding you down right now. And I want to invite you to unhook all the stories, the to-do list, the conversations you need to have after this, that you've had before this, and just let gravity hold all of them. Just for this time we're here together. You can pick it all up when we're done if you'd like. I want you to bring your awareness down a little deeper, feeling into the earth. This earth that is holding you. Just noticing her holding is recognizing the unconditional love she has for us. Always there, always holding. Now bringing your awareness up your spine to the top of your body, your head, feeling into the length of you. Then feeling into the air above us, the big space around us. Noticing our breath. Feeling the ribs as they expand and contract. With every breath, we're taking in oxygen, comes into the ecosystem of our bodies, enlivening our cells. And then we exhale carbon dioxide, sending it to the plants and the trees and the flowers, then translate it back into oxygen. Noticing this miracle of life on this living planet. This cycle of renewal, recycling, everything, including the air we breathe. This breath connects us to the whole ecosystem, the beautiful body of this earth. Offering some appreciation for the sacred reciprocity that we exist in every moment. Without even thinking about it, it's a natural part of what we are, of who we are. Taking 3 deep breaths in this. Offering some appreciation for the plants and flowers and trees on the inhale. And breathing out some love for the opportunity to be in that. Feeling into the ease of those connections. And one last deep breath in, this time bringing your shoulders all the way up to your ears. Dropping them out and wide with a sigh. Ah. Slowly wiggling your fingers and toes, bringing some movement into your neck and shoulders. Oh. As you open your eyes, not focusing on anything specific, just noticing the colors and the shapes around you. Tracking the corners and the edges of the room you're in. And then as you're ready, coming back to each of us. Thank you for being here today, y'all.
Thank you, Devon, and welcome, Malika. So we're going to start by going into breakout rooms, and it's very simple. You're going to have 20 minutes to explore together the questions I just put in the chat. So the first one is, do you have examples of using imagination practice to work on narrative change? Or is there an area you're focused on changing, which you want to bring collective imagination practice into? So that's really, about the detail of your connection to this work. What do you think would most help to shift the narrative further that you're working on? And have you been able to collaborate with social movements or other parts of the narrative making system to support a narrative shift? I think one of the main things that came out of that report I put the link to in the chat is that cultural spaces and cultural products are so important in shaping deep narratives. TV, social media, things in museums, in person experiences, deep immersion into a different possible way of being are so powerful in our culture. So, maybe you've thought about collaborating with people that work a bit like that. I don't work like that. I tend to work in a small community for an extended amount of time rather than in that more at that level of culture making. But I know, for example, Hilary works in museums, so maybe you'll have something interesting to add to that.
So, with all of those very juicy conversations, thank you for taking the time to share and explore with each other. One of my favorite things about breakout rooms is like you might have a share and something that you know, but as soon as someone says something else, it reflects something that you hadn't seen in yourself or in your own practice. And it just expands the possibility. It expands the landscape that we get to play in together. So thank you for that. To that end, we would like to expand the landscape even more by bringing all of the juicy things that we gathered in our breakout rooms to a collective Mira board. We're going to see if I can share real quick. So in this Mira board, we have 4 questions that we invite you to populate. And you can, if you're new to Mira board, you're just going to go find a sticky note in the corner and um, add your thoughts under the question. Let me get sharing.
No
Okay.
problem, Catherine.
So we
Okay.
have 4 questions. Which narratives in your experience or field seem to be the most sticky or difficult to shift? And why do you think that is? What has been the most effective imagination practice or other practice in shifting deep narratives in your experience or field? If resources were more forthcoming to fund this kind of work, what can you imagine doing with that? And finally, as practitioners, what do we need to sustain ourselves as we too are caught up in unsupportive narratives?
did we notice? What are we noticing from that beautiful collection of insights? Any thoughts?
I think there's something there about kind of growth. So this
Mm,
idea that the economic system has to grow, that we as individuals always have to grow, this kind of this culture that we live in, as if what we already have, what we already are, is not enough, and we need to be more, have more. Um, so, this idea of growth and that being grounded in scarcity and all of that being deeply problematic, um, seems to be there in different ways in the individual, the group, the actual system, the economics of things. And then kind of alongside that, this sense of nurturing self and
mm,
being able to connect to some of us in our group, we call it either connect to source or connect to spirit, and to find yourself kind of grounded and connected to that source as a way of creatively imagining, as a way of having empathy, of a way of starting to understand other people's experiences and positionalities, um, so that you can kind of just come at things without your own story being the core story, without your own identity being the core thing that you're always kind of acting out of. So just a few things there. I probably cherry picked the things that interest me.
of course. I hope so. Hilary.
Yeah, I'm definitely cherry picking what's interested me. The thing that's the thing that struck me, which is maybe self-evident, but it hadn't struck me before, is that there's a commonality in the kind of deep narratives that perhaps, and I may be wrong, we may not all be talking about deep narratives that are ultimately true. So what the narratives we're seeking for are the truth
Mm,
of our natures and of our world and of reality. And what we're counteracting is centuries of misinformation and disinformation and cultural conditioning. And maybe that's completely self-evident, but I hadn't really thought about it like that. That we're not trying to create narratives that aren't actual. We're trying to return to narratives that are true, and fighting against centuries of money and power and everything else that's been throwing stuff at this incorrect narratives. And yeah, maybe everyone else is going, yeah, duh, Hillary, yeah, of course. But then it makes you realize what you're fighting against, or what you're pushing against, and what you have on your side in this is what you have on your side is that this is the reality, the truth. Yeah, anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
no, I
That,
think
that really struck me that way.
what you're saying is really powerful. You're getting lots of claps from everybody because although we might although we kind of might believe that somewhere, it like somewhere in our head, sometimes it takes a gathering like this for it to sort of vibrate in our bones, And so I think it's when we are living, when we are bombarded by the deficit narratives and the power narratives, actually they impact us deeply. So yeah, thank you, Hilary. I think it's true. Go
I
on.
could just add one thing. When we did the town anywhere, the thing that a lot of people, this is where you collectively imagine a different future, and a lot of people afterwards said how energized they'd been by understanding how many other people felt like they did.
Yes. One of the things I
And
didn't like.
they didn't believe it, but then they were in a room and they were like, oh, I have to believe it now because
Yes. Yes, the philosopher Roberto Unger talks about the dictatorship of no alternatives, that we all end up sort of being signed up to somehow. We don't actually believe that there is really, really believe there's a possible difference. And I think that's what's so powerful about Town Anywhere is for a day you are free of the dictatorship of no alternatives. And it's quite something. Yeah. Thank you, Hilary, for that reminder. Who else would like to reflect on what they noticed?
Yeah, um I just noticed the tension in this kind of sense of like the kind of endless growth being like something you're always striving for, and like a kind of stepping away from that narrative and being like, as Natalie was just saying about like, I'm comfortable with what I have, right? And then that kind of played off against this sense of like, but I also have to change the world, you know, and this tension between like the agency and autonomy that it takes to kind of feel like you're able to change the world is quite exhausting, and the kind of the notions of like responsibility and obligation that like sit with that, I think is just, and I just kind of for the first time noticed this like this conflict between like, I am enough, it is enough, I can sit with that, I don't need to keep striving for more, but at the same time, gosh, it's a lot of work to do, you know, and the kind of responsibility that comes with being able to imagine that alternative. That's my thought.
I'd like to add something because I noticed that the word was not mentioned, but actually many of the things that you're mentioning is, our own decolonial journey, because our minds have been colonized, white or non-white, about success, scarcity. And Hilary, when you were sharing, like to return, I remember what indigenous culture said, to remember why we are here, this to remember. And to remember, we need kind of, to let go of the colonized mind that we inherited. I was just a little bit surprised by myself, because I'm part of uh, I've been in such an intense decolonial journey that I had not named that myself. So just wanting to name that as I read that, as I read what the narratives you're trying, like you want to shift, or you're naming, like this is like, we're all part of this, also of this decolonial journey.
Thank you, Malika.
I guess I'm thinking with that and that idea of it being overwhelming, the job we've got to do, but maybe we reframe that as how many hundreds of years of propaganda has been needed to colonize our mind. It took so long to do it, and that actually things can change quite quickly when there's a tipping point. And so if we think of ourselves as individuals having to try and undo hundreds of years of brainwashing, that's a big job. But if we think that we're remembering the reality, we actually, and we're a collective, there's enough of us that all remember and start to remember at the same time, change might actually be quite, it won't take hundreds of years to go back, because it's a remembering, and there's quite a lot that needs to be invested to keep us in this state. It's quite a lot of hard work. There's quite a lot of marketing. There's quite movies and book, like it's a lot. And maybe that's a clue as to how much is needed to keep us like this, is a clue to how quickly it could all unravel.
Anyone else want to say any more?
Well, I got to say, after 25 years, that this career as an experiment, I mean, like literally, what was offered me was, there's no way I'm going to be able, I'm 53 now. So when I was 25, 28, 30, when I was active and engaged in, full of all kinds of intelligence and capability and all kinds of privilege, when I was offered then, when life went awry, or I met strangers, or others had bits of it, like to hold myself accountable in this space, there was no other way other than to face how it is that everything gets done. And so this decolonial space, it is a wicked thing that's been done to babies and grandmas and aunties for so long, that to unpack that narrative is like, whoa. So in this kind of concussive, I had to swear off keeping a resume or a CV again in 96, just as a way to try to stay distant, but then to also have relationship with how that privilege takes care of you when you make ridiculous choices like that. Like, who gets to swear off keeping a resume or a CV again so that you can be an expert in this field? I mean, come on. So where this is going to go now, yeah, it's a lot of unpacking, but it's also childcare, it's housing, it's transportation, it's embassies. Make sure that we're all looking out for one another.
Thank you, Rami.
also like to say that I know it's hard. Like I fully all day know it's hard. And there, I remember years ago, I had the privilege of being a part of a ritual museum space. And in that week, it was easy. In that week, I got to taste what liberation was. And every step after that made it so much easier. Has made it so much easier to keep doing what we like. Once you have a taste for it, and you know how to find your way back there, right? You're always looking for it. You're always listening for it. You're always feeling for it. I think that's one of the reasons that imagination work is so powerful, because in a 2-hour session, we can give people a taste of it. In Town Anywhere, a day of Town Anywhere, you give people a taste of it, and then they're every single decision, every conversation they're having, every day they're like, oh my God, that is the corner on which I would rebuild the grocery store where everyone would have free access to food. Like, you're thinking about it everywhere you go. That makes all of this so much easier, but it's just a matter of like helping people find the taste of it, which is, another reason I'm so grateful for all of you doing this and like putting little morsels of it everywhere so that we can all taste a little bit more.
And just maybe to build on that, there's having a taste, which is essential, right? You have to whet your appetite. Then there's building your own practice, which could be, fleeting on a daily basis. You're in this kind of connected space where you can distance yourself from thoughts, from the conditioning, and kind of act out and be in a kind of maybe you could say more real, more authentic, more conscious, to say more conscious space, but then being deeply rooted in that consciousness all the time is a totally different level for me. Because, and I say that because actually when you're living in the minority world, we already have everything we need. We're just dealing with wants. Yeah, all our needs are met. This is, I want to live in an environmentally friendly community. I want to have racial justice. Most of our core needs are met, even when we're black and brown people experiencing some level of oppression, or kind of seeing the biodiversity loss in our own country, looking around, no bees, all of those things. Like our core needs are still met. But if you're somewhere like South Africa, West Cape, South Africa, and your actual needs are not being met at all, it's a different story. And for us to deal with that kind of issue where people's needs are not being met, all rooting from the same system, we have to be much more deeply rooted in our consciousness, because we have to start changing how we live in quite radical ways, and starting to like release and let go of privilege and all sorts of things. And so I think when you're doing it for yourself and your immediate community, when we're in this privileged space, like Rami said, I think that's one thing. When we're doing this to meet the needs of everybody and having to deal with every one of those that really do not have their basic needs met, that is often a class thing. It's definitely a race thing. Like that's a kind of different level of coming together.
Thank you, Natalie.
Real quick, I often think of how imagination is most prevalent in the spaces that have the least access. So I think like a lot of the times when I'm like leading imagination work, the people that are most connected to their imagination are the people who grew up in like dangerous homes, who were completely isolated, who weren't getting their needs met, who whatever, because they use their imagination as a way to survive. And I think that when a lot of the time when I'm thinking about like how do we fund imagination work, like I want to go into those communities that don't have their basic needs met and fund it there, because I think they have the blueprints for how we actually get out of this in a way that the rest of us can only imagine.
Or even we can't imagine yet, Devon. Even that. Yeah. Oh, so much, so much. Okay, so I'm going to just bring that into a moment of pause, but it is just pause because where I was hoping we would take this conversation is that we might make something, because I'm not that imaginative at certain times. I was thinking we would write something together, but maybe that's not the right thing to do. But I have a small budget of £600 to help buy some of our times, people that feel really moved to contribute to making something together. And I was thinking about four people, so maybe like £150 each, something like that, to spend a bit of time creating something which expresses these thoughts and ideas together in some shared sort of publication, so that we can express something about how imagination practice is important to deep narrative, and why deep narrative is at the heart of what we're all interested in doing, shifting that. So in a sense, I want to first of all just state that to you guys and say, whoever is interested, please do get in touch with me or Devon. And Devon, I'll just put my, I mean, you know my email address because I've emailed you all already, but I can't speak and write my email address at the same time. Yeah, me or Devon. And we would love to take this somewhere for those of you that would like to pick up that opportunity. And I think, it would be interesting for us, for those that would like to think about, do we want to bring some of the stories that we heard in the breakout rooms together with some drawing on some of the more kind of zoomed out stuff we did on the Miro board. Yeah, I'm not sure what the right kind of, I'd like us to work that out together. But if anyone's got any immediate thoughts about that, please just do say so now. If anyone's got any immediate responses, we won't make a decision about who would be involved at the moment. I'd like to give you space to kind of decide if you'd like to. But if you've got any thoughts about what might be a nice offering to the world on this, then I'd love to hear it. If anything comes to mind.
I guess a thought is just, I think it would be powerful to combine it with illustrations or photography or something visual, so that it's not just a text-based offering. Because I find that sparks imagination, is being able to visualize a little bit.
Yeah. And just building on that, maybe if you've got those visual elements, but also mixing it with things like poetry that do allow you to go deep and give people like the feeling, right? Something to pronounce feeling, but then also maybe with some data and other things that have different ways of reaching people, but making sure we can go deep as well as go broad and have that mix of text and visuals.
Lovely.
I'd like to try to have something remain tactile too. So if it's, handwritten letters or a postcard share, get a postcard, make a postcard, share that as a way to try to seed to see if something can take life on its own as well. That might be kind of an interesting way to really seed more of what can come from this.
And Hannah, do you have a sense of like what you want people to do after they've engaged with it?
I suppose what I think is partly the reason I'd like to have some kind of record of what we've done together and something we can create together is because I feel like the question of deep narratives is increasingly important in our political space. I think people are political space is increasingly asking, hang on a minute, where are these subterranean stories coming up from that we thought we had dealt with and we haven't? And I think the imagination practice has something so incredibly powerful to offer. So really it's kind of a field building thing, Catherine. Like, how can we just have something that expresses the value of this way of working in that space? So
Yeah.
I imagine it, what I'm imagining is, we could put it on our Medium publication, but I also think like the Joseph Rowntree Foundation might share it on social media. We would share it on social media. I'm not sure if there's necessarily a doing from it, but it's more like trying to make imagination practice and its value visible.
Yeah.
Could you,
So it's
could you-
a think, feel as well as do. What do we want people to think and feel
Yeah,
differently?
but where
Yeah.
maybe there's a do, which is send 10 postcards, put 10 postcards through your neighbours' doors, inviting them to a different kind of narrative. Maybe it's that, maybe there are some do's we could come out the other end which feel really small but
Yeah.
potent.
Even just, when you talked about the imagining of the town, like just that thought experiments is really powerful. And I thought at the beginning when you were comparing like a sort of a narrative shift with a deep narrative shift, that being able to see those side by side is quite powerful. And then maybe there's another level to that, which is then what could that look like? So, like what is learning, like what could, like let's not just think about what we're learning or living sustainably, like what happens if we stop trying to grow and get bigger and then so it's almost like taking people on that journey through narrative, deep narrative, what might that look like, and get people excited about that.
Yeah.
And that feels really visual, the way that you've described that. Like that's, yeah, interesting.
Go on, Malika.
There's
I would be. Can I speak, or who was speaking?
Malika first,
Okay.
then Natalie. Yeah.
Okay. I would be also curious if you have this little money and experiment to also look at one narrative that if it's four of you, I don't know how many of you have been struggling with, where that come from, how it holds grips on you, what have you practiced, what did it change in you, what didn't change in you, and then in others. Somehow, for me, that starts with oneself rather than narratives of what I want to change in the world. Because if I am abundance rather than scarcity, I vibrate. I will do things that if I'm in solidarity, like it's this energy, is this action will come from as I overcome, this, how you said, Ella, thousands of years of propaganda for competition, like what did I do to what was my struggle? Because I think a lot of these things are deep struggle. For me, I try to live in solidarity, but it's a struggle. It's surviving. It's as Devon was saying earlier, there are things that are super hard, super heartbreaking, super hard. It's so I would be curious to unpack one narrative that you all struggle with. What happened? How did it have waves in the external world as well? Yeah, thank you.
And it's not just struggled within the past, but ongoing. How are we ongoingly living it? And
Yeah.
I think what's come out so strongly in what you've all said, but also in the Miro board, is the deep interconnection between inner work and outer work, and that has to be present in the publication. It's not one or the other; it's a deep interconnection of the two, I think. Natalie, did you have more you wanted to say?
Well, just to kind of, I'm glad that Malika went first actually, because it connects with what Catherine and Malika said. So, say you are working with something in common that a number of people are holding, that lends itself really well to some of the futures narratives tools that allow you to kind of say you've got you start it with a headline or a phrase or something. You can kind of go down the iceberg and show people, what are the systems that headline keeps in place? What are the worldviews and values that underpin those systems? And at the deep narrative level, they call it, what are the myths and metaphors? And I think you mentioned something like, where these old ideas kind of re-emerging and bubbling up from, they kind of bubble up because those myths and metaphors right at the bottom of that iceberg have never really been popped. And so, showing people the layers that just this one phrase, these one thoughts it holds these systems, worldviews, and metaphors all sitting underneath it. That can be quite a good way of showing people visually how problematic these narratives are, but also a very fun thing just to say. Like in my very first job as a campaigner for Greenpeace, literally 25 years ago, we did this thing where we were in the UK mobilizing Black Britons to engage with oceans issues, but in the Eastern Caribbean. And so we had this string of postcards. So we got one person to fill in the address at the top and send it. It would arrive to them. They'd rip that off, and inside there was another postcard with a pre-written address to somebody. They ripped that and sent it, and then the third person got the postcard. So this idea of seeding a new narrative, you know, having postcards and things you can send, you can actually have just in one postcard a chain of already 5 that all your recipients then in turn send off, and it's a really good way of going. It was like going viral, but back in the day when we were using postcards.
Oh, thanks, Natalie. I love that day, that viral postcard day. Devon, we've overrun a bit, but I think we've actually arrived where we needed to arrive.
I was having the same thought.
Let me give you the last word, lovey.
I mean, the last word is always thank you.
Mm.
Deep gratitude for all of the wisdom that was shared and cultivated in this space. I'm infinitely excited to see how all of the seeds planted here today grow into new ways of creating narrative change all over the world, which is so cool that we get to be in a space with people from all over the world. So thank you so much. I'm going to invite everyone to come off of mute and say goodbye. Thank you. So hear each other.
Goodbye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you and
Thank you so
goodbye.
much.